And we are live, and welcome back to another discussion from the perspective of Jubilee Underground. I'm here with Jonathan Canone. My name is Judah McNeil. Jonathan, another day, another tragedy in our world. It seems like there's all kinds of crap going on in the world, but I'm excited to talk to you about the Jubilee aspect of what we're working on, what you're working on.
What I missed today?
Oh, it wasn't today? It was yesterday. Another derailment.
Oh, was it? Wow.
Yeah, in Ohio, and apparently there was people with hazmat. They had shelter and space, shelter and what is
Place.
the shelter and what?
Shelter in place.
Yeah, shelter in place, and so that's becoming a thing, I guess. Again, I thought we'd never hear that again after the pandemic. Well, I didn't think that, but there was a chance we'd never hear that again after the pandemic.
Well, let's jump right into some ugly stuff. You're gonna hear it a lot. Uh, when you get special dispensations to abuse your power during an emergency, there's going to be a lot of emergencies. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
If you can profit off of emergencies, if you can control populations during emergencies, there's going to be emergencies. So
Well,
that's
and
my
that,
way.
I mean, I think that, so the flip side of that, well, the flip side, I wanted to talk about the pandemic brought on a whole new shift in America in which people saw everyday life in a new light because they saw it from a perspective of where uh, the whole world stopped working. The whole world stopped going out on the streets. The whole world stayed home. And there was a huge insurgence, a huge surge of um stay at home projects. Lowe's and Home Depot boomed because people started doing more things. They're gardening and they're doing this and they're doing that. And homesteaders sort of found new, for better or worse, new comrades suburb
Yeah.
in the suburbs of Chicago.
No,
Um,
we old schoolers are pretty excited about it actually.
okay, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Tell me, what did you see in the shift, and what has continued?
That's good questions. So yeah, a lot of us. So my wife and I have been growing food and learning how to do plant identification for edibility and medicinal purposes for most of our adult lives.
Okay.
It's just um, and in my family, like my brothers and sisters are just like, he's off the res. Why is he like learning how to, build shelters and like alternative building methods and running around with old timers and hippies and Native Americans and learning the old ways. Um, and it's one time I remember my uncle who works he designed satellites for Lockheed Martin. He's a super smart guy.
Ooh.
And he asked me, like, where do you see yourself in, he hasn't talked to me in years. He's like, what's your goal? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Yeah.
And I was like, in a quiet place, raising a family in a natural environment and living off the land as much as possible. And this is back when I was a hippie. I was like, maybe in a yurt or a teepee with other families nearby that are living the same way.
Hmm.
And he said, what about that? What appeals to you about that? And I said, well, I guess I have no confidence that the current system is going to pan out.
Mm.
I don't think it's long term sustainable, and at least not for me.
Yeah.
It's not working for me, and so I think that just um, knowing how to take care of your family and how to provide for your family and your community without relying on the system TM to
Mm,
provide it for you is just a smart way to live, and I enjoy it. I enjoy growing things, and it just seems to be my path. And he's like, all right, well, I hope you're wrong about the system collapsing, because uh, that would be bad news for a lot of us. I'm like, well, yeah, I hope I'm wrong too, but something tells me I'm not. So let's say long term, um, I've been looking into ways of staying close to the earth and um, knowing how to do things yourself that provide especially food and some medicine.
mm,
Um, I definitely know when it's time to go to the hospital, and I take antibiotics when necessary.
mm,
But a lot of it is not necessary if you keep it on hand, and you can your body can be sustained by living organisms instead of going and buying something. So 2020, I guess a lot of people started realizing that there's systemic issues, and that in a matter of weeks, everything that you need at the store could not be there. Um, or you might be forced to not even get out of your house. Like, what are you going to do if you can't leave your property?
mm. Yeah.
Well, man, it's impossible to buy a house in the country anymore. Like, the demand went so high.
Mm.
Every- Everybody went berserk, finding places out of the cities and close to food sources, and learning old skills, and staying close to where the food was coming from, and saying, well, maybe we should raise our own eggs, maybe we should raise our own vegetables, and that's good. We're excited. We're always excited for new people who are like, I don't know anything. You know, I've been coding my whole adult life, and I don't know anything about um, potatoes. And it's like, well, that's great. I mean, at one point, I didn't know anything about potatoes too. It's just a learning process, and we're happy to help. Um, Happy to share the wealth. And if you're also, I know not everybody feels this way, but in the homestead community, but
Mhm.
I we're kind of the mind, like, if you need potatoes and don't have them, come get some.
Well,
You know,
I mean, isn't that sort of at the heart of Jubilee? The Jubilee Underground is the Jubilee aspect is that, hey, we're starting over, and in that reset, it's not like we're going to start over, or we started over a long time ago and you missed it. But it's like every time somebody starts over or starts something new like that, like comes into the fold as far as wanting to get their hands dirty, we are another mushroom. We see them as another mushroom, and bring them into the fold. And show them the ropes as much as we can help. Right, like we
right?
lend what we know.
Freely you have received, freely give it.
I like that.
So,
Yes.
like, so many people have taught me so much, and at one point I didn't know what I know. I was talking to Paul yesterday about it's really hard not to judge people sometimes. That, like, don't
Mm,
you understand this by now? Not this is something else. It's like, have you not seen the light by now? And it's like, well, at one point I hadn't. How can I judge other people when I used to be there? Um, and so many people took so much time patiently to teach me and shepherd me along, and I've grown and learned and changed and found a new way of life. So
well, let's
got
let's
to
be
do the same for the newbies.
let's be concrete. What is something? Can you give me a story of something that you have learned that fit into the Jubilee paradigm. Um, Something you've learned or something you've been able to teach somebody else that has really like helped you in your life, uh, in this project, or that's helped them in the project.
I have a hard time remembering the specifics. It's like,
Okay.
how did I get here from there?
Yeah.
Um, but I guess like in general, I was raised in a context where we were very patriotic,
Mm,
um, and really felt a sense of national identity. Um, you had to perform your duties for your nation state, and everything was riding on whether the right person got in office. And I was very political when I was a teenager,
mm,
early 20s, just like wanted my guy to get in there
yeah.
and was very active, um and kind of had an assumption that there was a class of people who were taking care of us all.
Mm,
That's a big part of it.
mm,
Like, they know what they're doing. They're dedicated to keeping us safe. They have our best interest in mind. They never sleep. They stand guard and make sure that nothing bad happens to us. Um, I think my first bit of cognitive dissonance was, in about 2001. I started wondering whether they were competent and whether they had our best interest in mind.
mm,
And eventually just came to unidentify myself from the whole thing.
mm,
When I say we, I don't mean I don't have a national identity. I have no framework, a point of
mm,
reference for a national identity at this point,
mm,
except for that, like my neighbors, my fellow
mm,
Americans, like you and I are
mm,
brothers and sisters, and we have to look out for each other. And you and I can decide what kind of world we want to live in and what's best for our families and make it happen. But I don't have the faith that there's anybody like out there who's going to save us.
mm,
Um, so when I see people who have an implicit faith that there is some class of people who stand guard to watch for us and that are going to make sure we're okay, I am like, what? Like, what evidence do you have that they are there, that they care for you and they have your best interest in mind? And then I'm like, well, I remember how it felt to be that way. It was kind of nice. But I've been disillusioned to that fact. So,
Was there a process of getting closer to the ground that helped you with that disillusionment?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's hard to remember the specifics and say, like,
Yeah.
then I met this person and who helped me and gave me one piece, and then I read this book that helped give me one piece, and now I talked to these people in this
Yeah.
Facebook group that helped give me another piece. But eventually, I just like following the breadcrumbs to what I consider the crossroads of freedom and responsibility. Like,
Mm,
freedom doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want to do.
right.
It's kind of scary actually because
Mm,
and which is why a lot of people avoid it.
mm,
Uh, it's scary to know that you're on your own and that there
mm.
isn't a massive infrastructure, benevolent infrastructure that has your back. Um, it can be really scary.
And that is what, correct me if I'm wrong, that is the crux of the Jubilee Underground impetus, is that because of that scariness, we need each other.
We need each.
And, but I guess what I need is you to help me. Can you help fill out my imagination a little bit more as to what that looks like? And forgive me because I am such a like, and it comes from my family. just a very my dad often says, well, what does that look like, and that's what it comes back to for me. It's like, I guess I need to see.
That's a good question. Um,
And
because I can live in the ideal abstract world, and it's like, yeah, like help me envision it with concrete examples. It's helpful for me to even be asked that
well,
question.
let me give you an example and tell me if this fits in the paradigm. um and this is something I've been thinking about lately, is that often, well, during the pandemic, it was so hard to get a handyman to do work on anything.
Right.
It was difficult to get a plumber. It was difficult. I called an electrician. He was 4 months out, and I didn't know if. Well, so that being said, lately I've had the idea, and I think I've gotten it through talking to you and talking about the Jubilee Underground. And this idea would be that I would contact friends of mine that work on their backyards,
Right.
particular people that like to get their hands dirty. Maybe kindred spirits like you and I, who live nearby, who have Saturdays free, or have a day during the week free, and we start a co-op of sorts. But instead of sharing, and maybe we do share um, stuff from our garden, but the main sharing would be we would take turns going to each other's houses. Be like a man day where or well, no, it'd be man day where we would go to each other's houses and backyards, and the host would say, well, this is what I need to do, can you guys help me? And
Yeah.
then the next week we'd go to the other person's house and he'd say, well, this is what I need to do, can you guys help me? And would that sort of fit within the paradigm?
Absolutely, big time. And I'm part of a community that does things like that for each other a lot. Um, like where I go to church, um, there it would just be a work day, and 6 or 10 very capable people who are experts in building, or there's electricians and plumbers and builders and mechanics, whatever, like people who are really good at building, putting things together, all pitch in together. And one of the things I've learned from them is that it does it doesn't have to be about ego, like you don't have to show off, and you don't have to tell everybody what to do. They just have a cooperative spirit, and they work together to help somebody out. So I've seen people that needed like trusses set and roof put on, and it was just done in the day. Um, and it's inspiring, but nobody's doing it to show off.
Right.
Nobody's doing it for their own sake. It's just
Well, and that's why it's probably difficult. Like, it's not something that just comes to mind as far as a concrete example, because nobody's doing it so that we have a concrete example. Everybody's doing it for a much different reason. That is just need, right?
right. Um, they when I first About 10 years ago, when I first started coming to church here, they actually, they have a directory with everybody's names, numbers, and addresses, email addresses, contact information, and then their birthdays, anniversaries, stuff like that. And then there was like an appendix in the back, and it was tools and equipment you are willing to share. And between the whole group of, 100 families or whatever, there's everything. Everything that you need. Like there would just be ladders, air compressors, nail guns, um, and then like stuff for processing. If you were going to, let's say, butcher and you needed a big kettle, or frying potato chips or whatever needed a big kettle and like
Mm.
an outdoor propane cook stove. You just call them and it just has their name and, like, 16-foot trailer, tractor, skid steer, everything. And it's
Mm.
still, so that's not in the directory anymore, but I still know that I can call up any one of, you know, half a dozen people and say, does it
Mm.
work for you if this Saturday I pick up your dump trailer and your skid steer and go and load up a whole bunch of mulch or gravel or whatever, haul it back to my house, dump it out, and I'll bring it back to you in a couple hours? And they say, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, very generous. There's a level of trust,
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Fight Club?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. Um, so I get the feeling that this is like Fight Club, except. So that's kind of what I want to start. I want to start sort of like a Fight Club, except instead of it being men destroying things, each other, or what have you, this would be building. We would be building each other's worlds up. Instead of fighting on a regular basis, competing, we'd be cooperating. So
Yeah.
it's sort of uh, it. What is that? It subverts the idea of Fight Club in some ways, but 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 it still has the the fraternity idea of guys getting together. Now, I say guys, and because I like to keep it simple, but I could see a world in which, because I think of getting my son involved, and I think of brothers that would have daughters that don't have any sons, and they would want, or even my daughter would be like, well, why can't I come along and help, you know? So I don't know. I'm open to variants of the idea, but to me, when I think of Jubilee Underground, and as we shape the website, the idea of a directory, I think, is very important. I think that that's something that we could add to the world, even if it's just a modicum of aid in for only certain areas. You know what I mean? Like, we just start somewhere.
Well, let's say this: like each local area needs to do this for themselves. But if there's some kind of a model, an example, and say like, this is how we do it here. If you like it, you can adapt it to your own use. Um, I think it works better with people who know each other and within a 15 to 30-minute drive of each other. Um,
Yeah.
but like people who live a half an hour from me in either direction. There's probably, I don't know, 50 people who know that if they, especially people who live in town, if they want to work on their vehicle, like they
Mm-hmm.
need to do their brakes, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and rotate the tires, but they have a quarter-acre backyard and nowhere to work on their driveway's on a hill, and they don't have a jack or air compressor or power hammer,
Yeah.
air wrench or nothing.
Yeah.
And what would be really cool, I think, would be for people who live in town and don't have much property, um, is to have a collective area where anybody could come um, and work on stuff, like a common workshop. Or
Mm.
Um, so in the country, in the Mennonite community, they have like butcher kitchens, and it's completely set up like they
Mm.
could. I don't know if they are certified by the state, but they could be if they aren't. But
It's so meticulous in its setup.
yeah, it's everything you need to efficiently butcher animals,
Mm.
your own animals. So there'll be like butchered days where everybody, usually in an extended family, all gets together and does like 20, cows in a day, or 20 pigs in a day or whatever, and all that works together. But also, if you're like, hey, um, I have a cow I need to slaughter, can I bring it over there? You
Mhm.
know, so I think that so I'm getting sidetracked, but there's probably 30 to 50 people who know that if they need a workshop, a place to rotate their tires and change their brakes and rotors, they can come to my. They just call me and say, "Can I have your shop on Tuesday?" And I say, "Sure, come on."
Mhm.
They jack up their car in there and use my tools, and um, I usually help them out a little bit. But yeah, I've been gifted with having like 20,000 square foot of space. I have a huge shop, a nice dry place with a concrete floor to work,
Okay.
and so I want my brothers and sisters to be able to also be blessed by what I have, and then I have the same arrangement with them for some other reason, like they don't have a shop, but they have something else I need to borrow. It's no problem, borrow it.
Well, that I guess that leads to my final question. I know we got to wrap up pretty soon, but
Oh, for
um,
instance, I have one more example.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that.
Last week when I inoculated mushroom logs, I just put the word out and said if anybody's going to be available, I'm doing this. It's an opportunity to learn and help, and I didn't say I'll pay you in mushrooms when they sprout, but I will. Um, so I
Cool.
I got two brothers to come help me, and one of them's done it before, and it just goes so much faster when you have, you know, a group of people working together on it. Um, so I told them afterwards that I'd be happy to pay them in mushrooms when they sprout, but it was really nice. It's nice having the company too. So I think next week or so he's going to bring his truck over and we're going to work on it, and um, just nice to have a community like that.
I, you know, I think you're touching on something that right there that I've come to find as the pandemic has grown more people working on their projects, on their hobbies, on getting closer to the ground with their various things, and maybe a shift more towards working with your hands.
Hmm.
um, One thing that is still there's still a dearth of people working together in communities,
Yeah.
and it's still, there's still dependence on this, which I am appreciative and grateful for, the ability to connect with people, social media, video, what have you. But as well as going back, as people were stuck at home, going back to working with our hands and stuff like that, there was an equal, or at least a similar surge in Zoom type stuff,
Right.
video
Yeah. I
type
wish I'd bought stock in Zoom in 2020.
stuff. Well, I'll tell you, it's been up and down. But um, but I guess my point is that as I'm looking for places to connect. I haven't seen a surge in community, and partly is because everybody was sort of that the thing we talked about last week. That citadel mentality, that of staying home in your home, protected behind your protected walls. That has been something that has increased, as well as people coming into the fold of home improvement and getting off the grid, and that kind of thing, homesteading. And one I think a huge place, the Jubilee Underground, an area that it will facilitate growth and excitement for people is the community aspect of it. getting people together and a place for people. And it's not that it's not happening already, but we could also be a megaphone. I feel like you're a megaphone for people that are already doing it, right? Like it's not a matter of
It's happening,
right.
but
It is.
and it'd be good to be able to see it. What does it look like?
Exactly. And where is it? Because I don't even know where to look. You do. I feel like you at least have a direction. Like, hey, the terminology, and hopefully I will too. And more people that join this project will have a better idea of how to get connected.
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, I started looking for it 20 years ago,
Hmm.
and found it 10 years ago.
Wow.
And I've been learning how it works for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I kind of take it for granted now, like it's just my life. But I do recognize that it's a huge need, and people are soul sick from being isolated. Um, I don't know if you've noticed, but people aren't doing okay. Like, just take a walk through Walmart one day. They're not doing okay. They're soul sick
Mm,
from being lonely and afraid.
mm.
And so to a certain extent, if you want it and seek it, you'll find it. And so, but sometimes you kind of have to make it happen. But it really helps to be apprenticed by people who this has been their way of life, maybe for generations. And I would say that the Anabaptist community has been doing a great job for a long time
Mm-hmm.
on togetherness and working together. I'm just a newbie, to
You're
it.
just a what?
I'm just a newbie. I'm a newbie compared to some folks.
Well, I can identify with that. Yeah, I've seen more in the Anabaptists, of course, the Amish, and also the Orthodox community seems to be more. It seems to have persisted because it was going on before, right? Like that was something that is a core value. And the Reformed community, any Reformed community you find, sort of the Dutch Reformed especially.
Yeah, they do life together pretty good.
Well, and I think the difference between some of these denominations that we're mentioning, um, and groups, and and what you're doing with and what we're doing with the Jubilee Underground is that we're more a little bit more, not a little bit more, we are more ecumenical in the sense that we are reaching out to even to everybody, right? There
Yeah,
is there, I guess that's my question. Is it is it as ecumenical as I see
it's never as ecumenical. I don't even like that word either. But it's never.
it?
The reality is never as unified as I feel it in my heart.
Okay.
You know, I just want it to be one big happy family. It's not going to be that way. But I think that people who have very different convictions and very different lifestyles can learn from each other,
Mm-hmm.
um, even if they can't make an agreement together. And that's a big part of community. You don't have to, you don't have to sell your soul or anything. It's not like you um, you can never leave.
Right.
It doesn't have to be all culty, but there does have to be some level of I have given you my word, you've given me your word, and we rely upon that word.
Some buy-in.
Um, yeah, like
Mm.
you're good for the commitment that you've made.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, not if you're if you're not reformed, or if you're not orthodox, or you're not Anabaptist, if you're
We're
not
not
even
Christian, right?
if you're not religious at all,
Yeah,
you
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
just want to freaking grow potatoes and trade it for raw milk. Like, give me a break. I don't need the whole, ideology behind it. But then that's cool. I just think that different communities can learn from each other for what strengths they have.
Yeah. Amen.
And like, if we could get over our reluctance and animosity enough to at least like spend a day together talking and saying what's it like in your life, and don't have to be all judgmental about the fact that you look different than me and you believe different than me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, if you hadn't, if you've been around on Twitter lately, it's like it feels like a civil war is brewing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's always the us versus them, and it's just
Yeah.
completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
Um, I want more unity. I want more peace, and sometimes it just happens in really small ways, and it takes a really long time to get there. But I have faith we'll get there.
I agree. Well, let's wrap up. And before we go, sort of along the lines of the last thing that we talked about last time, is there? I think my phone's dead. Is there something we can leave folks with? Maybe a short call to. What were you gonna say? Oh, I just saw you. I saw you perk up. Short, something that we could say, brief and pithy, that would entice people to join us. One thing I was thinking about, and I put this, I wrote this down, was just as I was writing down thoughts, going back to the source, sprouting up in community. That's all I. That's all I came up with. But I like the idea of sprouting, and I like the idea of a source because it was based on what you were talking about, like going back to the one true source. And what was it that you said last week about the going back to the source?
Yeah, return to the source and
Returning to the that's better.
growing it together. That's two good things.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. For now, we just welcome you, folks who've watched, if and tuned in at any point. And if you're tuned in now, we ask you to join us as we return to the source and sprout up in community.
Thanks, man. It's been a good talk.
Good. Thank you. Talk to you later.
All right, take care.